Hello, good morning, and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines. Death toll from a Russian missile strike on an apartment block in Dnipro rises to 35. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says rescuers fighting for every person after Russian attack in Ukraine's Dnipro. And it's happening so fast, Russian Defense Ministry says its forces launched massive strikes across Ukraine as it continues shelling residential parts of Kherson, Kiev, and Nikopol. A warm welcome to the program this week, but it's with a somber note that we begin, where the death toll from the Russian missile strike on the apartment block in Dnipro rose to 35 after missiles and explosions were heard across the country. Meanwhile, Ukrainian authorities say there is little hope of rescuing any more survivors from the rubble of a collapsed apartment block in the city of Dnipro a day after it was hit by Russian missiles, with dozens of people killed. The mayor, Boris Filatov, says that the chances of rescuing any more survivors was minimal. The regional governor's advisor, Natalia Babachenko, on the other hand, said 39 people, including 14 children, had been rescued so far, and up to 35 people could still be under the rubble. Emergency workers say they had heard people screaming for help from underneath the rubble of the 9-story apartment block in the city in east-central Ukraine. The workers used moments of silence to direct their rescue efforts, but freezing temperatures added to the rescue concerns. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky says rescue efforts in Dnipro would continue as long as there was any chance of finding survivors after the Russian missile strike put an apartment building over the weekend. Speaking to Ukrainians in his usual nightly address, President Zelensky also says Russians who failed to condemn the attack were cowards.
As of this moment, it remains unknown the fate of more than 30 people who could have been in the building at the time of the terrorist missile hit. Dozens of people were rescued from under the rubble, including 6 children. We are fighting for every person. The rescue operation will be conducted as long as there is even the slightest chance to save their lives. Debris removal is ongoing there. All the necessary services are involved. I thank everyone who is carrying out the rescue operation. I thank the State Emergency Service, the police, and the National Guard. I want to thank the municipal services, doctors, all volunteers, ordinary
подякувати комунальним службам, нашим лікарям, усім волонтерам, звичайним дніпрянам, які допомагають. На зараз переліку загиблих 30 людей, в тому числі одна дитина, дівчинка, їй було 15 років. Є повідомлення про те, що 2 дітей залишились без батьків. Мої співчуття усім, хто
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry said its forces had launched the wave of missile strikes against Ukrainian military and infrastructure sites over the weekend. However, the Russian defense ministry did not mention Dnipro as a specific target of any strikes. The defense ministry adds its troops had made progress towards the city of Bakhmut in Ukraine's Donetsk region, which had been the focus of Russian attacks for months.
On January 14, 2023, a missile strike was carried out against Ukraine's military and infrastructure sites. All assigned objects were hit. The targets of the strike have been achieved. On the next direction, the assault troop, in cooperation with airborne units and with the assistance from aviation, missile units and artillery of Southern Military Command, built on progress towards the northern outskirts of Artyomovsk, Bakhmut of Donetsk People's Republic, the Russian-controlled Ukraine, and railway station Salt, SYL.
Speaking of those latest strikes, the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson continues to endure bombardment from the Russian shelling. According to the head of the Kherson military administration, Russian shelling caused a fire to break out on the premises of the Red Cross facility, which is a rehabilitation center for children with disabilities. He adds that rescuers are currently working to eliminate the fire. He also reported that windows and doors were blown out as a result of the Russian strike on the rehabilitation center for children with disabilities. Now, 3 people have been killed and about 13 others injured by an ammunition explosion in the in Belgorod, a Russian region bordering Ukraine. According to the Russian state media TASS, a fire broke out in the early hours of Sunday in the cultural center in the rural area, which led to the explosion of ammunition stored inside. State media reported earlier that at least 10 Russian soldiers were injured in the blast. However, it's not clear if any servicemen were amongst those killed. And more disaster. A Russian rocket hit a residential area in the village of Kopyliv in the region, just outside Kiev. That's according to the Kiev regional governor, Alexei Kuleba. The rocket attack left a large blast crater and damaged windows and roofs in several privately owned houses in the village, which is about 30 kilometers away from the capital. Eyewitnesses and residents in the capital heard a series of blasts in Kiev before the air raid siren sounded, which is highly unusual. Now, a local resident called Ole says, quote, "There was no alarm, but we did not expect it." Air Force spokesperson Yuri Inat says Russia's missiles had likely been fired along a high, looping ballistic trajectory from the north, which will explain why the air raid siren did not sound. And it's affecting Kiev residents in so many ways. They took shelter expectedly underground as air alarm sirens sounded above ground. It comes as Russia's fired a second wave of missiles at Ukraine, forcing people to take cover as sirens blared across the country just hours after morning airstrikes that hit critical infrastructure in Kiev and the eastern city of Kharkiv. Moscow, which invaded last February, has been pounding Ukraine's energy infrastructure with missiles and drones since October, causing sweeping blackouts and disruptions to central heating and running water as the winter bites. Now, a Ukrainian military official says the southern Ukrainian city of Dnipro was also struck by shelling in the early hours of today, as we've been reporting. The head of the Dnipro Regional Military Administration said in a Telegram post that more than a dozen homes, several power lines, and a gas main were damaged. At least 15 shells struck Marhantesk and another settlement on the outskirts of Dnipro. He added that no casualties were reported. As far as Ukrainian officials reacting to this goes, they say Russian forces shelled the southeastern city of Zaporizhia overnight. According to Zaporizhia City Council Secretary Anatoly Kortiev, several people were injured and homes were damaged in the attacks. He adds that 3 people, including a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old, were taken to the hospital for treatment. Now, Zaporizhia was among a number of Ukrainian regions targeted by Russia over the weekend, as missile strikes against the country's utility infrastructure led to emergency power cuts. Now let's talk to Mr. Dakwa Thomas, expert in international relations theory, speaking from Lagos State University, LASU. You're welcome to the program this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let's begin with your initial reactions from this latest wave of missile attacks from Russia. Obviously, we see this as do you see this, rather, as an escalation of the conflict?
Well, there is no escalation yet until a third party intervenes. For as long as it remains between Russia and Ukraine, we cannot talk of escalation. We are still witnessing what we have been witnessing since February 24 last year. There was nothing that was different, apart from the fact that this was the first time that a residential apartment will be torn apart as a result of missile attack. And that's quite unfortunate, because residential areas and civilians are supposed to be protected, and in fact, they are not supposed to be the major targets of any missile. We can talk of military depot, you can talk of soldiers, you can talk of any other thing, but definitely not residential buildings, not civilians, not schools, not hospitals. These are all institutions that have been protected by so many conventions, and it's still part of what we can call the genocidal mission. You know, because there is nothing, I have consistently seen this, and I have already said it so many times, that this is nothing but genocide. Going by the elements and the components of what constitute genocide. If you are killing civilians, you are imposing conditions or inflicting conditions that could exterminate them physically. Like when you are trying to destroy completely, and the main target has always been the heating system, you know, the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure and the heating system at a particular time that they are going through winter, you know, period. And this is unfortunate. So that means you are actually trying to kill the entire nation, you know. That's the target, that's the objective, that's the aim. And this is nothing but genocide. So it has not escalated until we see a third-party intervention. That's when we can talk of escalation.
Speaking of third parties, let's take a look at the allies of Ukraine, such as the United States and the UK, who've been speaking about sending armored tanks to help the Ukrainian. If that actually happens, how do you see this as affecting the war?
Well, the only way it can affect the war is if Russia decides to now attack these weapons at the point of delivery or before the point of delivery. So far, so good. Nothing has happened to the deliveries since the war started. The Ukrainians have been collecting the equipment. They have been collecting the ammunitions and everything. So until there is an attack by Russia in the process of delivering these heavy equipment and tanks, then we can now be thinking of escalation, because they are not supposed to attack. Most of the equipment will definitely come through the allies' territories, definitely not where Russia can have a claim. So they are either coming through Germany, they may come in through Poland, they may come in through anywhere. So they have points or locations where they take delivery of all this equipment. And the moment Russia attacks any one of them at the point of delivery, or when those people have not handed over, then it becomes a very serious problem for Russia. So that's where we can now talk of escalation, because definitely the third party will now have to intervene, because you cannot come and attack me on my land or the land of my ally.
Mr. Thomas, in a ground offensive, beg your pardon, the deployment of tanks also adds a greater dimension to the powers that are behind it. So for those trying to mediate the end of this war, will this deployment, if it does happen, of tanks cause Russia to give a more heated response? Because we find that in most wars, historically speaking, the tanks, for territorial warfare, for terrestrial warfare, is the make and break of the situation in most cases.
Well, the Russians have already stated that they will see the supply of all these tanks and all these heavy equipment to Ukraine as an intervention. But what can you do? You can't do anything. This is not the first time they are going to be taking delivery of some of this equipment. Yes, heavier ones may be coming now. At the same time, it's still about equipment. It's still about supply. It's still about delivery. They have already tagged them as enemies. But the point is, they are still unable. Russia is still unable to define or to decide at what point it can attack this equipment. At what point? So it's the point of delivery. It is at that point that is giving them problem, because so many supplies have been made, so many deliveries have taken place, but they have not been able to do that because you cannot attack them while they are bringing the equipment, and you cannot attack them while they are delivering the equipment, because the moment you target them with any missile at the point of collection or at the point of delivery, the moment you target them, then those who are, the allies are going to be affected they are going to be affected personally and physically. So it is this problem that Russia is still unable to decide what to do in this respect. So there is no doubt about it that it's a kind of third-party intervention. It's a kind of third-party intervention, definitely without the military involvement, without the military personnel getting involved. But delivery and supply of equipment is also an intervention, like you said. But how do you undo this? How do you attack them? How do you stop this delivery? How? Where? Which point? At which point do you want to stop this delivery? At which point do you want to attack? So it's going to be very difficult. That's the dilemma that Russia is still facing. There is no doubt it has already defined it as intervention, and it has already decided that, look, this means that you are part of the whole thing. So now, if you have defined those who are doing the supplies as your enemy, as target, and then you cannot attack them, that shows that he's also afraid of escalating the crisis, of escalating the conflict. You know, so I know Russia is also wary of the fact that it cannot allow this war to be escalated, except it wants to go into Armageddon, except it wants to go into all nuclear warfare. But it cannot handle this kind of situation because it is not even sure, apart from Belarus, it's not even sure whether China is going to be to intervene militarily in the event that it decides to go and fight NATO. So the position of China is not clear. And this will not allow Russia to do anything that will escalate the conflict. It's going to be very dangerous for it to escalate the conflict and allow NATO to intervene, because it's going to be decisive. You know, it's going to be, and don't forget, it has already exhausted most of its own ammunitions, most of its own armory. You know, yes, I know they have large scale, they have in large supply, in large quantity. At the same time, you cannot compare that to people. To nations that are collectively going to make the supplies and then, fight you from different directions. So he's only fighting Ukraine now. It's still exhausting. It's almost going to be a year that it has started this war, and it's just destroying. But I have not seen. Look at Soledar. Soledar is just a small town. It's just because of the salt. It's a salt mine town. You know, so only Soledar for now that you can say maybe fully, occupied by Russia, and his target is to go to Bakhmut, but I don't think the Ukrainians will allow them to move to Bakhmut.
Therefore, let's take a look now concerning the posture of Russia. Earlier you said that this is a genocidal attack. Do you see this? But the posture, for instance, the Defense Ministry of Russia did not mention Dnipro as a specific target in those attacks, and if there were targets, it seems they're not owning some of these events that happen in Ukraine. It seems as though they're making it up as they go along. What do you make of their posture? Do you see Russia as showing restraint, knowing that Putin...
No, it's not showing any restraint. It's only alluding to the fact that
it was in the course of intercepting the missiles that they fired that the Ukrainian missiles missed the interception and then pierced through the apartment. But that's a lie. Everybody knows that was and in any case the kind of missile that pierced through that apartment had been discovered to be K-22. Had been discovered to be K-22, which is a Russian, an old missile, a kind of missile that is very destructive. So when you fire a missile, when it happened in Lviv the other time, it was the missile. They inspected the missile. The Polish inspected the missiles and saw that it was a kind of. It was Ukrainian missile. It was a Ukrainian missile, which meant that it was an accidental interception that failed. An accidental interception. The interception failed. So that was what landed into part of Poland. But in this case, they have already also discovered that the missile that belongs to Russia. There is no way that they can disagree with that. So, but definitely they will not own up because this one is a clear case of genocide. It's a clear case of objective of a mission that is meant to exterminate a particular group of people in a particular nation. So this is a concrete evidence. It's not a kind of accidental. It's not a kind of collateral damage. It was intended for that, so that they can have large number of people that will be killed. Before, most of the missiles they have been firing had been targeting the energy. Even targeting energy infrastructure is a genocidal attack. It's a genocidal attack. So there have been people that have been dying. Those who have been dying have been maybe 1, 2 people, 3 people. So now they just wanted a situation where they will have a large number of people that will be affected. And that was why they went into an apartment that is 9-story building. That's about 200 and something people. 200 and something plus apartments. So they knew the implication. They knew the damage they were going to achieve here. So they can deny anything. Russia can deny anything. It has always been denying most of all these attacks, especially when it concerns civilian and civilian infrastructure. So
finally, what do you prefer as a solution from the countries that can have influence on this war? Do you see that Russia has maneuvered itself into a situation where a catch-22 situation, where they're damned if they do, damned if they don't? They can't withdraw so as not to lose face. They can't go forward full blast so as to cause a terrible escalation to the war and collateral damage that cannot be quantified. So what do they do? Are they in a corner from which they can't back out of?
Yeah, if you know Putin very well, you know that he's a proud person. And when you are fighting a kind of war of prestige, he sees this war as a kind of, he sees this war as something that can enhance his prestige. And unfortunately for him, he miscalculated because he thought in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, Ukraine will be a walkover or they will come into submission. He never anticipated or envisaged a situation or a scenario where all these nations will come together and be supplying arms. So that was the miscalculation. He never expected or envisage a scenario where these nations, where these allies will be supplying equipment or maybe ammunitions or these heavy weapons to Ukraine. So now the war is dragging. The war is dragging. It's almost going to be 1 year. And then it's unfortunate for him because when you say it's a military operation, everybody in Russia will expect you to conclude this in a matter of months. But when it's going to the 2nd year, then they begin to have problems. Because number one, it is not only Ukraine that is distracted. They are also distracted in Russia because people are also they are not interested in any war. In fact, they stated it expressly. Right from the beginning, the Russians did not want any war with Ukraine. But now this war is dragging, so it can have some kind of effect. Now, those leaders, the world leaders who could talk to him, Erdogan of Turkey and Macron of France, these people had tried initially, when the thing started, they were always in communication with Putin. You are always on phone. You know, they are always having conversations with him. Unfortunately, because it's a war that was instigated as a result of pride. And you know, if you know Putin very well, he will never go back. He wants to see this war to the end. And it's going to be unfortunate because in the course of saying that you want to see an end to this war on your own without any intervention, is going to be colossal. Because even as at now, there is no way you can escape being tried for genocide. No way. No way Russia. There is no way Russia can be. Look at those people who even did the Nazi thing, 1930, 1933. They are still paying for it. They are still being tried. So they can try him anytime.
Indeed. You know, we'll have to leave it there, though. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for making out the time to speak to us with your expertise on the issue. Mr. Dakwa Thomas, expert on international relations theory from Lagos State University. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
After the break, propaganda video. Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin posts a video claiming victory in Soledar as Ukraine asserts that fighting continues. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. The founder and head of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, posted a video claiming he visited Soledar after it was taken over by his mercenaries in 2 weeks. Kiev has disputed Wagner's claims that it now controls a small town which holds significant symbolic value but is not concerned strategically pivotal. The town has also caused infighting between Prigozhin's private forces and Russia's defense ministry over who deserves credit for the assault. In the video, the Wagner mercenary leader said he came to town to award medals to his fighters, who he says were almost exclusively responsible for capturing Soledar. The video shows Prigozhin standing with a man who he calls a commander who helped to take over Soledar. The Wagner leader said, quote, "Soledar was taken over in 2 weeks. Soledar was squeezed by our claws and then was divided into parts. You can't eat an elephant all at once, like they say. You have to cut it in parts," according to him. Now, he also says Ukrainian soldiers who refused to surrender were killed. He says the bodies of Ukrainian soldiers will be sent back to their motherland. Prigozhin credited what he describes as a wealth of fighting equipment and communication systems for giving his force an edge in the battle. Britain will send 12 Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine as part of efforts to intensify support for the Ukrainian defense against Russia. That's according to Downing Street. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak outlined the UK's ambition to intensify its support to Ukraine, including through the provision of Challenger 2 tanks and additional artillery systems, during a phone call with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. In a post on his official Telegram channel, Zelensky says he thanks Sunak for the decisions that will not only strengthen them in the battle, but also send the right signal to other partners, according to him. The Western Alliance's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine received a shot in the arm this week as multiple European nations for the first time answered Zelensky's long-standing call to supply modern battle tanks to Kiev. France and Poland have pledged to soon send tanks for the Ukrainian military to use in its efforts to protect itself from Russia. Finland is also considering following suit.
Aid packages, but some Western officials have been cautious.
Now let's talk to our London correspondent, Juliana Olyinka, who will be speaking to us about these issues, including the Ukraine housing project and Brexit. Juliana, so good to see you.
NATO is desperate.
It's nice to see you, Olamide. I've not spoken to you for a while. Happy New Year.
Yes, it's Olamide, but that's forgiven. What kind of response do you think, what's the UK Parliament's response to this decision by Downing Street? Does it have the support of the entire Parliament for the sending of these tanks to Ukraine? That is the Prime Minister.
I must apologise. I'm having significant audio issues here. As I'm listening to you, I'm also hearing somebody speaking, I believe, from Berlin, but I will try and march on. We're talking about those two Challenger tanks, which Downing Street confirmed on Saturday they would be sending to Kiev. And of course, this comes at a time when we know that the Russian offences has really ramped up, and we have heard from NATO as well as other allies in the West that they need to send more artillery. So not only is Rishi Sunak and the British government going to be sending these two Challenger tanks, they're also going to intensify recruitment and training of Ukrainian soldiers, training taking place on this side of Europe. And of course, this is going to be backed up by Germany and America. Now, there was some concern about the political storm that engulfed Downing Street last year, because, of course, I'm sure everybody remembers that Boris Johnson and Volodymyr Zelensky were very close, and not just close politically. They did seem to strike up a friendship. There were some concerns that once Rishi Sunak took over, that perhaps that allegiance and that support may dwindle slightly. And I think this announcement that was made by Downing Street on Saturday afternoon after a telephone conversation between Zelensky and Sunak, it does go to show that, you know, Britain stands firmly next to Ukraine. You asked about the parliamentary response. We haven't had one because, of course, this took place on the weekend. But listening to what has been going on in the chambers since last February, all parties in the House stand shoulder to shoulder with the Conservative government in trying to usher in as much support as possible.
Pressure on other NATO countries.
Okay, Juliana, now many blame the war in Ukraine and the COVID for the current cost of living crisis in the UK, but how about Brexit?
Will take time to train the Ukrainian.
Okay, well, so the cost of living crisis goes. It keeps on going on. Inflation currently running at double digits in this country. There are strikes. There were strikes taking place at the end of last year. The winter of discontent. It certainly is continuing into the new year. I think. The most critical strikes is the striking nurses. They will be striking members of the Royal College of Nursing on 2 working days this week. This is an ongoing bitter dispute with the British government over pay, jobs and conditions, which are 3 terms everybody in the UK is familiar with. However, I think nursing have also added the patient safety as well. I think, you know, you can ask anybody in this country at the moment, what is the mood like? And I think the mood music is that the country is, you know, getting sicker and getting poorer, and that's not great. We did have GDP data in last week showing that we have officially not fallen into a technical recession. But when you look at the data, it can be distorted to how people are coping on the ground, and people are really struggling at the moment, which is why charities have raised concerns about the UK Homes for Ukraine scheme, which was pretty much lauded when it was introduced in the summer last year. For 6 months, for a minimum of 6 months, people had to offer or were asked if they could offer up their homes for Ukraine refugees. They were paid £350 a month. That came to an end at the end of last year. What is going to happen to all those Ukrainian families who some are struggling at the moment? There have been clashes between families because of cultural issues, because of cramping conditions, and because of the cost of living crisis. Britons in this country feel as if they cannot afford to look after these families that they ask to support. So there are some concerns that there could be a looming crisis there, because when people have high energy bills and lower wages, most people want to look after themselves and their families, not a third party. So that is an issue. Brexit, that is another issue in itself. I don't know if we have time to go through that, but that is a long-running battle that the British government is currently facing with EU officials.
Yeah, but the last 3 UK prime ministers, plus the current one, are Brexiteers. And all has been quiet about Brexit and its impact lately. Why?
Well, Rishi Sunak is a Brexiteer. I think he's made that pretty clear. Yeah. In fact, Liz Truss wasn't a Brexiteer. She voted to remain in the EU, though she's since changed her position. Rishi Sunak, the current Prime Minister, is very much a Brexiteer. He has made it pretty clear throughout his parliamentary journey, and it does appear as if, you know, the language and the tone of Boris Johnson wanting to get Brexit done has very much remained within the Conservative Party. We did have some breakthrough last week when James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, met with his EU counterpart, Mark Sefcovic. They managed to sign through some new technical infrastructure which would allow EU officials to check goods coming in from the rest of the United Kingdom over the Irish Sea into Northern Ireland. Good for EU and the UK, perhaps not so good for Northern Ireland unionists who do feel as if they've been sacrificed for Brexit. In fact, things are so difficult in the island of Ireland that the Parliament of Stormont isn't sitting because they cannot come to some sort of agreement about the invisible border on the island of Ireland. So it's all going on, and it is difficult. If you look at most polls, most people say that Brexit has made Britain poorer. It's very difficult to argue against that. And then we have our own domestic issues too. I think since the Scottish referendum, since the Brexit referendum, there's been a kind of silent civil war between all four nations, particularly between England and Scotland. Hopefully, Rishi Sunak thinks he may have put that to bed because he was the first Prime Minister since, I believe, Theresa May, to have a private discussion with Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister. He went to go and see her for dinner last week. So there are a multitude of issues, and unfortunately for the people of Ukraine, their plight seems to be much lower on the agenda of the day for Downing Street. But at least these Challenger missiles have been ticked off the list. There will be more artillery support. And as you said in your opening there, you know, Volodymyr Zelensky continues to thank the British people for standing shoulder to shoulder at a time when they're going through such a significant crisis.
One more, Juliana, one more Brexit question. Someone who's gone MIA. Where is Nigel Farage, the UKIP and Brexit leader?
Well, he's no longer the Brexit leader. Nigel Farage is a commentator now, very much not really getting involved in the entire Brexit process. Of course, he was the leader of the UK Independence Party, which played a significant role in trying to get Britain to leave the European Union. He was successful at that, but he wasn't successful in transferring that momentum into getting a seat in the House of Commons. I think he lost pretty fantastically twice. I think for most people in the UK, he's seen as a kind of extreme right-wing commentator. Very rarely see him on mainstream news at the moment, but he does stand in the fringes and offers some support to those who want to ban migrants from coming into this country, who wants to set up some hostile agreements on the odd occasion. But when it comes to serious diplomatic talks between Downing Street and EU officials, he's certainly not involved in that.
Thank you so much, Juliana. We'll have gone on and on, but time forbids us. Our correspondent, Juliana Olyinka, our London correspondent, thank you for your contribution today.
Thank you.
Now, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz put a second LNG terminal into service over the weekend in the eastern German town of Lubmin. Germany is setting up 4 new LNG terminals on its North Sea and Baltic coast in order to lessen dependence on natural gas imports from Russia. Scholz, after ceremoniously opening a valve connecting the regasification unit to the gas network, said, quote, "It was a good feeling to help open the pipeline by turning the wheel. This will continue where we will see the arrival of another ship that we need for regasification. LNG arriving at Lubmin is regasified on the floating regasification and storage unit and then pumped into gas pipelines that formerly connected the Nord Stream 1 pipeline to the European gas network. The German government has ordered a total 4 FSRU units to replace natural gas imports to the submarine Nord Stream pipeline, which is closed down by Russian energy corporation Gazprom, allegedly due to technical issues. After the break, lottery ticket holder in Maine wins $1.35 billion Mega Millions jackpot. Please stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage of Russian invasion. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the European Union needs to keep increasing pressure on Russia and supporting Ukraine. Speaking at a joint news conference with the Swedish Prime Minister in Kiruna, von der Leyen says the diversification of gas supplies led to a decrease in purchasing price since the start of conflict in Ukraine and the subsequent reduction of Russian gas deliveries. The head of the European Commission also says the 27-member bloc needs financing tools for its clean tech industry to help it compete against the United States, where firms have government support through the Inflation Reduction Act.
And we deployed twice as much renewable energy capacity as expected last year. Therefore, it's so important to have, besides the state aid that should be used, we need to keep increasing the pressure on Russia. And we will continue, of course, our unwavering support for Ukraine. So today, we can say this hard work paid off. Gas prices today are now lower than they were before Russia's invasion. The gas prices for the Dutch futures contracts have dropped over 80% since August. Our storage levels are filled with 83%. This is among the highest levels ever at this time of the year. And we deployed twice as much renewable energy capacity as expected last year. Therefore, it's so important to have, besides the state aid that should be used, also a funding tool or funding tools that we will develop that give an answer to the need of investment in clean tech, mostly common European projects and common European interests in the green transition. And here I think it is for us very important to be fast. Therefore, I really welcome the excellent cooperation with the Swedish presidency, because the investment decisions are being taken now, and we need the green transition now. What is important for us, and I want to repeat that again, is that with the clean tech sector and all its innovative power that it has, we have a level playing field. We want to compete on quality. That's important. We do not want to compete on subsidies, but on quality. And therefore, the funding element for us is important, first of all, to have the needs assessment so that we have facts and figures on what exactly is the definition of the clean tech sector, what exactly is the impact, and where do we have to have the targeted support of the public European funding. The changes have to be implemented in a law that then would lead to the disbursement of funding under Next Generation EU. But first of all, the implementation and the legal solutions have to be found by Poland itself.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Now, joining us to give us a business angle on the Russian war in Ukraine is our business correspondent, Laddie Williams. Good to see you this morning, Laddie.
Good to see you. Good morning.
Now, how will Germany opening up its second liquefied natural gas terminal help Ukraine, because it's clearly now a Ukrainian ally?
Well, at the end of the day, we've seen Germany and Europe, try to wean off reliance, on Russian gas. And we've seen them, push through, in 2022 with the first terminal, the first floating terminal. That one was in Wilhelmshaven. And, they've been ramping up, the LNG terminals, since last year. So the second one is a big one. And there's more, coming on stream. And at the end of the day, it's to avert an energy crunch, in the country and, on the continent. And also, we've seen the weather actually, play a hand in all of this, and that's helped them actually, stay strong, even though Russia cut, gas flows to them. Normally, they would have between 0 degrees Celsius and minus 6 degrees. That would be the weather, the winter. But they had about 3 degrees, so it's been mild. And that's why we've seen, natural gas bulls, they've been battered, since towards the end of last year, into this year, with natural gas prices coming all the way down to pre-war, levels. So at the end of the day, this is just to keep, the biggest economy in Europe, afloat, even though they're not getting the flow of natural gas, from Russia. And this is all, helping out. And they're also going to reactivate, some of the nuclear power plants, that was supposed to be shut down, in 2022, but they're having to reactivate that, some coal, power plants. So they're having to also go back to some dirty alternatives, which obviously we know the climate change activists would not like that, but it's what they have to do. To keep the economy growing, to protect industries and also protect households, and it's been working for them, even with their reserves too of gas.
How come Germany is falling to the bottom rung of investment rankings? Yeah,
so they've moved down on that ranking. They used to be around the top 10 level, but they've had to come all the way down, according to a research firm, because at the end of the day, we've seen the rising energy costs that has impacted them. Having to pay more for energy in the country, so it's reduced the investment attractiveness for Germany. And we've seen countries like the US and Sweden, those have actually, ranked up because they're having to pay less, for energy. And in Germany, they also have some, labor shortage issues that's playing into them coming down on the ranking. And basically adding to that, what they had some tax issues before that, paying high taxes in the country. So those, coming from other countries to invest in Germany are having to pay more taxes, having to deal with labor shortages and rising energy costs. So all of that, put together has brought them down on that ranking to about 18th from out of 21, countries, which is obviously not a good, nothing to cheer about there. But hopefully with the way they've handled, the gas issue and securing, gas for the country, maybe 2023 they might get back up on the ranking.
How about the market expectations for this week?
Well, so market expectations are, they're starting up a little cautious, this week, even though it's a shortened trading week for the U.S. The U.S. had an incredible run, last week, was all in the green. And we also saw the NGX also close in the green, last week. But, entering this week, the global markets are still, global investors are still, quite cautious at this time, because at the end of the day, the headwinds are still there. But the expectations that, inflation is on a downtrend in the U.S., which will signal that the next rate hikes won't be as aggressive as what we saw in 2022. So all that is playing into, the markets, but they're looking okay this morning.
So more from business across the board in Business Morning at the top of the next hour.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Laddie.
Yeah.
Now, for the sporting perspective of the war, Ukrainian winger Mikhailo Mudryk is excited to join Chelsea and looking forward to work with coach Graham Potter. Chelsea announced Mudryk as their fifth signing of the January transfer window on Sunday after he completed his move from Shakhtar Donetsk to the Premier League club. In a statement, Shakhtar says they will receive 70 million euros for the player, and another 30 million euros is envisaged as a bonus payment. Mudryk, who was named Shakhtar's Player of the Year for a second year in a row, caught the eye with his performances in the Champions League group stage, where he scored 3 goals and grabbed 2 assists. He's the second Ukrainian player Chelsea have ever signed, after the former striker Andrei Shevchenko joined the Blues from AC Milan. And finally on the program, a single lottery ticket holder in the United States has won a $1.35 billion Mega Millions jackpot. The identity of the winner was not yet publicly known, but the jackpot's organizers say over the weekend that the winning ticket was sold in the northeastern state of Maine. The winning ticket, which cost $2, was bought at the hometown gas and grill convenience store in the town of Lebanon. The lucky combination of 6 numbers drawn late on Friday night was 30, 43, 45, 46, 61, and Gold Mega Ball 14. The winner overcame steep odds of 1 in 302.6 million, which led to 3 months of drawings without a claim on the jackpot.
At 6 o'clock this morning, my phone went off. The phone identified it as a phone call from Augusta, Maine, and I was told that my store sold a $1.3 million winning lottery ticket. I thought for sure it was a scam. It was either going to be an ask for a gift card or my social security number shortly after, but it was not. So I looked online, and sure enough, we had sold the ticket. So the media frenzy quickly ensued down here at the store. It's been a real busy morning, and we are anxiously awaiting to see, hopefully, it's somebody that we know and we see often.
And that's today's edition of Russian Invasion of Ukraine. Thank you for watching. I'm Alum Devakoli. Have a great day.